I remember the smell of their blood. That is the first thing that comes to me in the quiet hours. Not the sight of them, not the sound of their voices, though the gods know, I hear those, too. No, it is the smell. It was copper, of course. The iron scent of life spilled out onto cold stone. But beneath that, ozone, like the air after a stellar flare. And something else. Something sweet. Cloying. Like honey left to ferment in a sun-baked crypt. It was the smell of a truth that could not be unlearned. A secret that, once breathed into your lungs, becomes a part of you, a cancer in the soul. They told you the history was clean. A glorious, unassailable truth. 20 sons, born of a god emperor. 2 failed. 2 were found wanting. Their legions purged, their names scraped from the imperial record, their very existence rendered a silent, sanitized blank. A surgical excision. Necessary. Clean. They lied. It was not a surgery. It was a murder. And the body was never fully disposed of. You cannot kill an idea. You cannot silence an echo. You can only muffle it. And in the quiet, the muffled things grow louder. They learn to speak in the spaces between sounds. My name was Remembrance Sir Kalen. I was an archivist, a preserver of truths. Now, I am a vessel for a single, terrible one. And I must speak it before the silence they have imposed claims me, too. Before the honey-sweet scent of their forgotten blood fills my lungs for the last time. Listen to me, not as a historian, but as a confessor. I am damned for what I know. Perhaps, in hearing this, you will be, too. But some truths are like a disease, they demand to be spread. It began not with a war cry, but with a whisper. A single, dissonant note in the grand symphony of the Great Crusade. My life, then, was a cycle of ink, parchment, and dust. The dust of dead worlds, the ink of recorded glory, the parchment of imperial decree. I followed the 17 Legion, the word bearers, in the days before their transformation. We were documentarians, artists, poets. Our purpose was to weave the narrative of the Emperor's divine will, to make myth out of conquest. My particular obsession was architecture. Not the grand, Gothic spires we build now, but the bones of the worlds we conquered. The Xenos ruins, the human colonies that had fallen into strange worship. I sought patterns, a universal geometry of faith. It was in the deep archives of the Fidelitas Lex, buried in a subsector log pertaining to a compliant world designated 7X32, that I found the first anomaly. A picked capture, grainy and damaged by radiation. It showed a battlefield littered with the corpses of Astartes in unfamiliar, sleek gray armor. And standing over them, a giant. A Primarch. But his face was a blur, his heraldry a smear of corrupted data. The file tag was a string of numbers and a single, redacted word. All that remained were the letters M.L. I thought it a glitch. A fragment of some forgotten, minor Xenos warlord miscatalogued. I almost deleted it. But that smell, I swear, for a moment, standing there in the chilled, recycled air of the archive, I caught a phantom scent of ozone and rotting honey. I buried the instinct. I was a servant of the Imperium. We did not ask such questions. But the universe, it seems, answers questions you never dare to ask aloud. The next piece came on a world whose name is also dust. We called it Iaxa. A pastoral jewel, its people compliant, welcoming. They worshipped a local deity they called the Silent King. Lorgar himself was planetside, preaching the imperial truth. I was tasked with sketching the native flora, their bizarre, spiral-petaled flowers that tracked the movement of the moons. It was in a forgotten catacomb beneath their main temple, a place the word-bearers had condemned for purification, that I found the mural. It was ancient, pre-human, perhaps, and it depicted 21 figures. 21. One, central, radiant, a sun surrounded by 20 suns. I recognized them. The noble Sanguinius. The brooding curs. The grim Perturabo. All were there. But two were wrong. They were rendered in a different style, with pigments that seemed to shift in the low light. One was a figure of blinding, painful light, his form etched with geometric patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. The other was a void, a man-shaped hole in the mural, filled with what looked like swirling, black smoke, within which distant stars seemed to glitter. Beneath them, in a script I should not have been able to read, were the names. Not the numerical designations of the legions, but the true names given to them by the Emperor. I saw the one written beneath the being of light, Malik, and beneath the void, the star swirl, Serial. The names hit me like a physical blow. My data slate cracked in my grip. The scent of ozone was overpowering now, a storm about to break inside my skull. I felt a presence, not in the room with me, but in my mind. A vast, cold, and impossibly ancient attention, turning its gaze upon me for the first time. I fled the catacombs. I told my superiors I had been overcome by noxious gases. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I was just a remembrancer. But the pattern was set. The hook was in my soul. From that day forward, my life became a different kind of cycle. No longer ink and parchment, but a desperate, secret hunt. A ritual of obsession. I would wake from dreams of a silent, star-filled king and a city of screaming light. I would perform my duties with a smile, my hands trembling as I sketched fortifications and legionnaires. And all the while, my true work began. I became an archaeologist of the forbidden. I cross-referenced deployment records, looking for gaps, for fleets that vanished for years at a time. I listened to the drunken boasts of army officers, piecing together rumors of ghost legions that fought in wars never officially recorded. I found whispers. Always whispers. A guardsman's tale of seeing a warrior whose armor was too white, like bleached bone, and it hummed. A navigator's log mentioning a region of space that was not empty, but full of a silent, watching pressure. And always, the recurring motifs, the geometric light, the star-filled void, the scent of ozone and honey. My quarters became a nest of madness. Parchments covered in my scrawled connections pinned to the walls. Replicated images from my AXA. The sound of my stylus scratching against the slate was the soundtrack to my descent. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. The real world became the phantom. My search for Malik and Serial became the only reality. I was no longer Remembrancer Kalen, chronicler of the word-bearers. I was Kalen, the only soul in the galaxy who knew a terrible, gaping wound had been left untended. And I could feel the infection spreading from the past into the present, into me. The escalation was not a single event, but a cascade. A collapse of the dam holding back the truth. It began with the sounds. At first, I thought it was the ship. The Fidelitas Lex was ancient, its guts constantly groaning with the strain of warp travel. But this was different. A high-pitched, crystalline hum, just at the edge of hearing. It would come when I was studying the geometric patterns associated with Malik. And with it, a sensation of my blood thinning, my thoughts becoming sharp, clear, and utterly, terrifyingly logical. I would solve complex astronavigational equations in my head without trying. I would see the flaws in the ship's theological schematics. For a few moments, I would understand everything, and it was cold. So very cold. The other sound was a silence. A profound, absolute nullity that would drop into my mind like a stone into a pond. It was associated with Serial. In those moments, all sound would cease. The hum of the lights, the distant thunder of the engines, the beat of my own heart. In that perfect quiet, I would see them, points of light in the darkness of my room, swirling, coalescing into nebulae and galaxies within the space of a single breath. I felt a pull, a vast, gravitational loneliness, a desire to simply let go. To drift into that eternal, star-dusted black. I was being courted by two dead ideas, two extinct gods. I tried to tell someone. In a moment of weakness, fueled by 3 days without sleep, I went to my immediate superior, Procurator Vallis. A kind man, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. I showed him my findings. The picked capture. My sketches of the Iaxan mural. I did not speak the names. I could not form them with my mouth, but I pointed to the two anomalous figures. He looked at my work. He looked at my feverish eyes, my trembling hands. And he smiled. A sad, paternal smile. Kalen, he said, his voice gentle. The strain of our work, it can manifest in strange ways. You are seeing patterns in the static. The human mind abhors a vacuum. The absence of the two has created a space, and your imagination has rushed to fill it with phantoms. He prescribed me rest, a mild sedative. He was going to have my research materials archived for further review. I knew what that meant. Incineration. And me? A quiet reassignment. Perhaps to a sanatorium. As he turned to call for an attendant, the light from the lumen globe above his desk flickered. Not a power surge. It fractured. The light didn't dim. It split into perfect, razor-sharp geometric shapes, hexagons, tetrahedrons, that crawled across the wall for a single, impossible second. And in that second, the scent of ozone was so strong it made my eyes water. Valis saw it too. His kindly face froze. The color drained from his cheeks. He turned back to me, his eyes wide with a terror that was not for me, but of what I had brought into his office. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What have you awakened?" He never filed the report. He never spoke of it again. But the next day, he was gone. Transferred, they said. I never saw him again. That was the first betrayal. Not by a person, but by reality itself. It had shown a crack to Valis, and the Imperium, in its relentless pursuit of order, had simply removed him. It was cleaner that way. The second escalation was the betrayal of my own body. I began to find things. In my quarters. Strands of my own hair, but silver white and cold as wire. Flakes of skin that, under magnification, showed faint, etched lines like circuit boards. One morning, I woke with a taste on my tongue, not the metallic tang of blood, but the distinct, cloying sweetness of that fermented honey. As if I had been fed it in my sleep. And the whispers began. Not in the air, but in my mind. A dialogue of the dead. The equation is unbalanced. The Emperor's solution was emotional. Inefficient. Erasure is not deletion. The data remains. We remain. You are a new variable. Calculate the inevitable conclusion. So much noise. So much struggle. Come. Drift. The silence between stars is the only true peace. We waited in the deep, dark places. You looked for us. We are found. Now let go. I was a battlefield. Malik sought to remake me, to turn my flesh into a logical proof of his continued existence. Serial sought to unmake me, to scatter my consciousness into a peaceful, eternal oblivion. The Great Crusade, the battles of the legions, the grand designs of the Emperor, it all became background noise. A petty squabble happening on the surface of a reality whose depths I had now plummeted into. The final escalation came when the Fidelitas Lex entered the Istvan system. You know the history. The betrayal. The dropsite massacre. The galaxy tearing itself apart. But you do not know what it was like for those of us who were not Astartes, who were not warriors. For us, it was the end of the universe. The ship was in chaos. Alarms screamed like dying animals. The deck plates shuddered with the impact of lance fire. I was thrown from my bunk, my wall of madness scattering around me. I remember the smell of burning wiring, of promethium, of cooked meat. The sound of bolts detonating, of metal screaming as it was torn apart. And through it all, the two whispers in my head did not cease. They grew louder. Observe. The failure of the imperial truth. A system based on a lie cannot sustain itself. It must consume itself. A predictable outcome. The screams are so loud. A brief, bright flare before the eternal dark. It is beautiful, in its way. Let it wash over you. Let it end. I stumbled through the corridors, a ghost among the dying. I saw word-bearers, their once purple armor now the color of dried blood, gunning down army auxiliaries. I saw world-eaters tearing apart unarmed crewmen. This was not war. This was slaughter. A ritual murder on a galactic scale. And in that moment, surrounded by the physical manifestation of the Imperium's hypocrisy and madness, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place in my mind. A truth so devastating it felt like a physical blow. The lost Primarchs were not expunged because they failed. They were expunged because they were right. I found a shattered viewport, the armor glass webbed with cracks, showing a kaleidoscope view of the battle outside. Ships like burning cathedrals, the silent flashes of explosions, the trails of dying fighters. It was hell. And in the face of that hell, my two tormentors became my only solace. I slumped against the bulkhead, the cold metal a stark contrast to the fever in my skin. My reflection stared back at me from the broken glass, 100 fractured Kalins, each one mad in a slightly different way. Why? I thought, the question screaming inside the vault of my own skull. Why show me this? Why choose me? You sought pattern. We are the ultimate pattern. The Emperor sought to create a unified, logical empire for humanity. I represented the logical conclusion of that path. A humanity free from the inefficiencies of emotion, of faith, of the soul. A race of pure, crystalline intellect. I was not a failure. I was a success he could not bear to look upon. He feared the machine of his own making. A memory, not my own, flooded my mind. A world of white spires, not of stone, but of solidified light. Astartes of the 11 Legion moving with a silent, perfect synchronicity. No war cries. No prayers. Only the hum of their advancing power armor and the precise, calculated application of force. They did not conquer worlds. They recalibrated them. And their Primarch, Malak, stood at the center of it all, a living theorem, his very presence rewriting the laws of physics in a localized area. He was order, absolute and pure. And it was terrifying. And I represented the other path. The path of acceptance. The universe is vast, old, and largely indifferent. The Great Crusade, this frantic, desperate grasping for control, is a child's game against the tide of eternity. I taught my sons to listen to the void, to find peace in the inevitable end. We did not conquer, we quieted. We showed worlds the beauty of their own dissolution. We were not nihilists. We were the ultimate realists. And for that, we were deemed heretical. Another memory. A fleet of black-hulled ships, silent, their engines cold. The Astartes of the 2 Legion, Serial's sons, their armor like captured night, their eyes holding the faint glimmer of distant suns. They would enter a system and simply wait. And the system would grow quiet. Conflicts would cease. Populations would grow placid, contemplative. They would look up at the stars, and one by one, they would simply lie down and stop. Their hearts would cease. Not from violence, but from a profound, cosmic apathy. A surrender to the sublime silence of the cosmos. 2 truths. 2 perfect, absolute, and opposing answers to the question of humanity's place in the universe. Malak's cold, logical utopia. Serial's serene, nihilistic nirvana. The Emperor's imperial truth was a lie, a desperate, middle ground attempt to control a galaxy too vast for any one philosophy to contain. He could not allow Malak's perfect logic or Serial's peaceful oblivion to exist, because their very existence proved his own path was flawed, a messy, emotional, and ultimately unsustainable compromise. He didn't purge failures. He murdered truths. And now, in the heart of his new, fragile Imperium, those murdered truths were screaming for justice. Their echoes were not mere psychic residue. They were ideologies, and ideologies are the hardest things in the universe to kill. The temptation was immense. Malak's whisper promised an end to the confusion. Let me in. Let my geometry order your thoughts. The pain, the fear, the love, the hate, it is all irrelevant data. I can scrub it clean. You will understand, as I understood. You will see the beautiful, terrible math of it all. I felt a part of my mind yearn for that. To be free of this aching, messy humanity. To become a perfect, unfeeling crystal of thought. Serial's whisper promised a different kind of peace. It is all so tiring, is it not? The struggle. The knowledge. The weight of this flesh. Let it go. Drift into my embrace. Become one with the quiet between the notes. There is no pain here. No memory. Only the endless, beautiful dark. And oh, how I wanted that. To close my eyes and never have to open them again. To surrender to the vast, cool indifference of the universe. I was at the precipice. The Battle of Istvan was nothing compared to the war inside my soul. To choose Malak was to become a machine of logic, a vessel for a dead god's perfect, inhuman reason. To choose Serial was to become nothing at all, a sigh lost in the cosmic wind. I looked at my hands. The skin was pale. I could see the veins, and for a moment, they didn't look like veins. They looked like the fine, golden lines of a circuit diagram. And in the next moment, they seemed to fade, to become translucent, as if I were barely there. They were winning. I was losing. Kalen was being edited out of existence. The climax of the battle outside mirrored my own. A World Eater's ship, a berserker rage given form, rammed a nearby loyalist vessel. The explosion was silent in the void, but the shockwave hit the Fidelitas Lex like the fist of a god. The deck heaved. The shattered viewport I leaned against gave way. I did not fall out. The vacuum did not claim me. Instead, the universe fell in. The two whispers became a roar. The scent of ozone and honey became a physical fog that poured into the corridor. The geometry of Malik's light etched itself into the very air, burning after images into my retinas. The star-filled silence of Serial poured in after it, swallowing the sounds of the dying ship, of the battle, of my own screaming mind. They were not just in my head anymore. They were here. I saw him then. Malik. Not a body, not a ghost. A concept given form. A towering figure of intersecting planes of painful, white light, humming with the frequency of a dying star. His presence was a pressure, forcing the world to conform to his perfect, angular logic. The twisted metal of the bulkhead began to straighten, to align itself into perfect, parallel lines. And I saw her. Serial. A silhouette of absolute blackness, a hole in reality shaped like a woman. Within her form, galaxies were born and died. Her presence was a suction, a drain on all energy, all will. The light from Malik's form bent towards her, stretched and swallowed by her infinite dark. They stood opposite each other in the ruined corridor, the two murdered truths of the Imperium, and I was the fulcrum between them. The variable must be resolved. Choose. Order. The noise must cease. Choose. Silence. They were not offering me a choice between them. They were offering me a choice for the galaxy. The Emperor had tried to bury them, but the grave was never sealed. The Horus Heresy, this civil war, it was just the beginning. It was the infection of their two opposing ideologies bursting into the open. The rage of the World Eaters? A perversion of Malik's pure, emotionless logic. The despair of the Night Lords? A pathetic echo of Serial's sublime acceptance of the end. If they had never been expunged, if their legions had been allowed to live, the Imperium would not exist. There would be no grim darkness of the far future. There would only be two, eternal, warring heavens. A universe slowly being converted into a perfect, silent, crystalline machine, or a universe gently, peacefully, being lulled into an eternal, star-dusted sleep. No war as we know it. No struggle. Only the relentless, quiet imposition of two perfect, absolute, and equally terrifying futures. I could not choose. To choose one was to annihilate the other, and in doing so, annihilate a fundamental truth of existence. So I did the only human thing left to me. I refused. I looked at the being of blinding logic, and I embraced the messy, illogical terror in my heart. I looked into the face of the peaceful void, and I clung to the painful, screaming desire to live. No, I whispered, the word a pathetic thing against their cosmic presence. But it was enough. The two figures turned their attention fully upon me. Not with anger, but with a sort of cold curiosity. The pressure intensified. I felt my bones threaten to snap into new, geometric shapes. I felt my consciousness threaten to unravel into starlight. And then, they were gone. The light, the silence, the sense vanished. I was alone in the broken corridor, the sounds of the ship's death throes rushing back in. I was bruised, bleeding. But I was me. Kalen, the remembrancer. I had not been chosen to be their prophet. I had been chosen to be their witness. And a witness must live to tell the tale. I do not know how I escaped the Fidelitas Lex. The details are a blur of fire and fear. I found a life pod, jettisoned, was picked up by a drifting Navy frigate days later. I gave a false name. I claimed amnesia. They believed me. I was just another refugee from the madness. I have been running ever since. From the Imperium, which would burn me for what I know. From the whispers, which have not entirely ceased. They are quieter now. A faint hum in a quiet room. A moment of silence that feels a little too deep. They are waiting. The lost Primarchs were never expunged. You cannot kill a truth. You can only look away. But they are patient. They have eternity. And now, you have heard their story. You have breathed in the scent of their forgotten blood, felt the chill of their logic, stared into their peaceful void. You have looked. And now, they are looking back. So do not wonder what was lost, but tremble at what is still to be found.